All right, how's it going, everybody? So this is something I've wanted to do for a long time now. Since I've been doing Exodus 90, I've wanted to just kind of do videos that will go along with the writing reflections that I've been doing and sending out every week. So I've been doing those for a while now and writing a lot more over the last few months, which has been just outstanding for me personally, and I think that some people have gotten some value out of them as well. So this one's going to go along with the most recent one that I did, the most recent writing reflection, which is called the Honors Program. So I tell the story basically that when I went to Mount St. Mary's University, I think my least favorite class that I had there was Western Civilization. So it's basically the history of the West, right? And it was kind of weird for me because I really loved history. I really loved learning about the West. And I just really didn't like the class. And I think a lot of it had to do with the professor that I had at the time. But also me, where I was as a student at that time I was definitely not in my prime, so I was not an easy student to teach, an easy student to have in your class. And I recognize that, fully take responsibility for that too. So me and my best friend at the time, Tommy, he was my roommate all 4 years of college. We were in that class together. And so it was, it was a party every day. We were rambunctious. We were loud. We were excited. We had a lot of energy. He was a track athlete. I was an ROTC. And so we just had a lot of energy, and we weren't super into class first semester of college. And so we had to get separated multiple times because we'd always want to sit next to each other and stuff. But that class was the first class that we had together in the honors program at Mount St. Mary's. And so I'm positive that I was only selected for the honors program because of affirmative action type stuff. Because when I got there, I remember leaving an honors program event one day, and one of my friends, Kevin, actually said to me, he said, "Hey man, like, how did you end up getting into the honors program?" And we talked about our high school GPAs, and he had like a 3.8, I think, or 3.7 in high school, and I had like a 3.1, like barely a 3.1 in high school. And he didn't get an invite to the honors program, I did, right? And it just kind of worked out that way. And thanks be to God that I did, because it really was transformative and played a pivotal role in my college experience and in my life there at the Mount. So what I learned through the honors program was a lot. Like when I first got the offer to do it, I didn't want to do it at all, because they just offered, having harder classes, more challenging material, more challenging grading, and just kind of higher standards. And it wasn't like high school where the honors program, it wasn't graded on a curve, so it's not like if you got a B plus, it'd be an A minus in a regular class or whatever. So I really didn't see any value to it. It's kind of like, what is the purpose? Like, sure, we have some events, we have some, whatever, like you get to be in classes with people who are taking school a little bit more seriously typically. But I didn't see the value of it. But my mom was all about it. She was all about that life. Like, she loved the idea of me being in an honors program. I was in honors classes when I was in middle school. Getting into high school, it kind of faded out, fizzled out. So she was pumped up that I was going to be in the honors program, right? So she was all about it. And so we compromised, and I ended up doing it. And so in the honors program, just really when I got in there, I really got to see, how much, how big the gap was between what a good, dedicated and committed student, the way that they approach school and the way that I approach school. Which, over time, like I basically, my grades started to lower, not because things got harder, not because of any really like different challenges or stuff that I faced, but just because I think that I never tried harder. So as things got a little bit deeper in school over the years, in high school and things like that, it just requires a little bit more effort, right? It wasn't that I was any dumber than I was compared to the other students in my classes, but I really had to try a little bit harder, and I wasn't willing to do that. But through the power of association, I really got to see what I was capable of with the honors program. And it changed a lot for me. So I want to talk about that mainly today. And so I talk about Eric Thomas a lot. He's one of my favorite motivational speakers. 10 out of 10 recommend checking him out on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever. He's amazing. And so I actually heard my first Eric Thomas video when I was a freshman in college. Tommy showed it to me. And so one of the things that he talked about in another video, or it was an audio, it was on Apple Music, that I've listened to many times, is he asked this question: what do I need to know and who knows it? The title of the audio is Use What You Have. And in that, he asked the question, what do I need to know and who knows it? When he finds himself in his master's program, so his kind of version of the honors program, he's in a master's program. He had dropped out of high school. So he, again, horrible habits as a student, really was never kind of raised or taught to be a good and dedicated, committed student. So he was just kind of behind the curve. And so in his master's program, he finds a friend named Todd, and Todd is crushing the game. The teachers love him. He's getting good grades. And Eric's like, I got to figure out how I'm going to learn from this guy. finding his answer to that question, what do I need to know and who knows it? I need to know how to become a good student. And this guy seems to know what he's doing. So he offers him some home cooked meals, and he's like, hey man, you come over for some home cooked meals. You hook me up and teach me how to do the school thing a little bit better, and we'll make a great team and everybody will be happy. So he learns a lot of lessons from him. He shares in the audio all those lessons. But for me, I didn't have a singular person that was that individual in my life. I didn't have a singular friend who really showed me the way. Tommy was a great influence on me in a lot of ways, and we did help each other in different areas of life. But even he wasn't necessarily like my Todd, It was more just kind of over time, me seeing how these other students, the ways that they studied, the ways that they came together in groups, the way that they emailed each other and asked about things and reminded each other about upcoming assignments and things like that, and the way that they went in depth in studying their homework, the ways that they would read before class, the ways that they would ask questions in class, the ways that they would just kind of get on the good side of the teachers. And I just started applying all of that stuff, and it really changed the game. I was able to continuously improve my GPA semester over semester and make the dean's list every year while I was in college. So it was a huge deal for me, and just such a blessing. And it taught me a lot. And one of the main things it taught me is that power of association, which I've talked about a lot in my life. And it's a biblical thing. You've heard every speaker talks about this, right? So Gary Vee talks about how you become the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. Tony Robbins talks about it. Eric Thomas talks about it. But also in the church world, it's actually a biblical principle. So 1 Corinthians 15 verse 33 says, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good character. And I think it's something that is one of the most it creates a lot of hypocrites, this belief, because we all know it, right? Every parent preaches to their kids, you need to watch who you spend time with, right? Anytime a kid's kind of drifting off, getting in trouble, the first thing that the parents usually analyze is who are you spending time with? Who are your friends? Who is it that's teaching you the stuff that we're not teaching you? And, I think that God has that same example, that same experience with us oftentimes. Is God's trying to teach us. He's trying to mold us. He's trying to create us to be, somebody that he needs us to be in this world. And we allow influences to derail us from that. St. Paul talks about that in his first letter to Timothy. I believe it's the first letter. He talks about how he says, who was it that hindered you from running the race? Who was it that got in your way? You were doing so well. Like, who was it that knocked you off? And it's exactly like St. Paul, St. Timothy's spiritual father, exactly like a parent that and their kids getting in trouble in school. He says, who was it? Who you been hanging out with? Who you been hanging out with is causing you to act up, man? Because he's like, you were doing so well and something happened. And he's like, it's got to be your association. So St. Paul tells us this: bad company ruins good character. And we just see a lot of hypocrisy with that, because we see people that preach that and then go and have terrible friends that just drag them down, or they're in toxic relationships with their significant other, the people they date and stuff like that. And they just surround themselves with these people that just drain them and just take them further and further away from God, which is not what God wants for you. And I think it's a tough thing for a lot of people, because we don't want to feel like we're leaving anybody behind, right? So we're on this Christian journey, we're on this walk. We don't want to feel like we're abandoning our friends, we're abandoning people. Like, that's not what Jesus did, right? Like, Jesus was nice. Jesus didn't leave people behind. But when you really look at it and you read the gospel stories, like, Jesus didn't stop for every person. Jesus stopped and gave people time and said, this is where I'm going. You want to leave everything behind and follow me or not? Right? And for a lot of people, they had one decision to make. Now, if they were to say no and they would come back later and join, he would welcome them with open arms. But he was not somebody that he would have never gotten to Calvary. He would have never gotten to the cross. The whole point, he would never gotten to the point where he fulfilled his entire purpose for why he was created, or why he came to earth, his entire mission for coming to earth. He would never have fulfilled that purpose if he stopped with every person who said, no, I'm not going to change yet. If he said no, every person that said, no, I'm going to stay in my sin, I'm going to stay stuck in these ways, and I'm not willing to grow and change and get closer to God. But we do that to ourselves all the time. And I think a lot of people miss out on their Calvary because of that, because they're not willing to leave certain people behind and move themselves towards positive relationships, and the people are going to help them grow and stretch and get closer to God. So it's incredibly important. And I say to do so, to do it prayerfully. I think that's one of the biggest things for a lot of people, is that some people will say, oh no, I think that we're just called to, minister to these people. And you're right. There's certain people that you're called to minister to that are not going to be people who uplift you and that bring you higher. But you just have to be careful with what you do with certain people, right? So I always say that, I'll maintain certain friends from different stages of my life, but I'm just careful with what I do with them, right? So if somebody that I used to, do things that I don't like to do now, I don't like to partake in now, and wants to hang out, then we can go get lunch and talk and have a good conversation. We can go to the gym together and work out together, but we don't need to go drinking together. We don't need to go out to the bars together and things like that. So that's what you just have to be careful with what you do and who you do it with, right? And so just be prayerful about, and that's something I think people are not, they don't do enough of, is we don't sit down and reflect and pray about who is it that you want to be my best friend? Who is it that you want me to spend the most time with right now? Who is it that you've placed in my life to lead me closer to you, Lord? And who is it that you've put in my life to guide me and to teach me how I can be a better man, how I can be a better woman? Instead, a lot of times we make these decisions emotionally. So it's people that have been there for us through a lot of stuff, or they've basically just existed in our, close proximity to us long enough that we've developed an emotional attachment to them. There's really no logic. There's no actual benefit. There's no spiritual benefit for either person. A lot of times it comes from pride in our end, thinking that we're actually like saving somebody when we're not. You see that happen a lot with people in their friendships. Is they're like, oh, I'm really helping this person, and it's like you're really not. There's been no movement, right? Sometimes people need a harsh, decision. Like they need to be bluntly asked, like, are you willing to let go of some of this stuff and move forward with me or not? And a lot of times we're too passive in that. And it's a lot of fear and cowardice and emotional attachments that we disguise as kindness and love and evangelization. And so what I want you to do is just be prayerful about who it is that God's calling you to leave and who he's calling you to pursue. And those people are out there. I think it's really important to know. And so another thing that I want to talk about is that exactly is how do you find the good ones? I've traveled with people, or I've talked to people before, and they just said to me, I really wish I had people like this at my church. I really wish I had friends like this in my life. And it's like, you do, like, those people exist. There's not just good people in Cincinnati. There's not just good people in one part of the world or the other. They're around, and there's obviously more in some places and less in others, but you have to be intentional about pursuing those people out. And you have to be intentional about developing relationships with people who can help you in life. It's just part of the way it goes, And I think a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people are unwilling to put themselves in those awkward situations. I've done it a lot. I've gone to church events by myself where I didn't know anybody. I moved to a city where I didn't know anybody and lived there for 3 weeks in Cincinnati before I started my job, and was on leave from the Army, and I had nothing to really do, and just had to go out and meet people. And I made friends during that time. Made friends with through my work, but I also made friends going to young adult events at my church there in Cincinnati. And in Fayetteville, North Carolina, I tried to organize those events for people so that they could get connected. So see a need, fill a need. When you see that need, that there's not those places and those opportunities for people to get to know each other and to create those bonds and make good friends, you can try to solve that problem. I think that's something that's really important, is that you take ownership, not just for your own personal life, but also for the lives of other people. That's what leadership is. And that's what you're called to do, is be a beacon of light and a beacon of hope, and to be able to improve the lives of other people, not just yourself. But it starts with developing it in yourself, right? If you don't have good relationships, if you don't have good friendships, if you're a parent that doesn't have good friendships, uplifting relationships, and you're wondering why your child doesn't, I don't get where the dissonance is there. I don't get where the disconnection is, but it's not going to happen. It just doesn't exist. That you're going to duplicate typically what you are and what you've done. And so same thing with your friends. If you're not setting that example, then it doesn't make sense for you to expect other people to listen to you in that way either. So I think it's really important too to understand that this is the choice that we have. One of the many choices that we'll make for heaven in our lives. There's a lot of people, I think, unfortunately, I know people, whether it's in my family or friends, who choose their spouse, or they choose a friend, or they choose a hobby or something like that over going to church, over developing their relationship with God, over their prayer life. And that decision, while it seems small, to make it for one Sunday, while it seems small to make it for one afternoon or one day, over time, it develops into a habit. It develops into a lifestyle. It develops into a mindset. And it develops into you being very distant from God. And that's literally what the choice between heaven and hell is that you choosing heaven and you choosing God, you choosing to go and worship God and to praise him in his presence and falling in love with that experience. That is what heaven is. And that's what you're going to choose at the end of your life. Like you've chosen it your whole life. You've either chosen yourself and people and things, or you've chosen God. And it's going to happen. There's a million decisions every week that you're going to make between one of those other two things. But do you repent and go back, and say, hey, like I had things backwards. I'm sorry. And try to put God into the center of your life and consistently strive to put him at the very, very center of your life, your top priority. And when you do that, you're going to be the type of friend that's going to attract those good friends, because you're going to become a good friend. You're going to be a good brother, son, daughter, wife, whatever it is, whatever your roles to play are, you're going to be that good, positive, encouraging, uplifting, challenging, person in a relationship, because you've created that and you've allowed God to be close to you. You've pursued him in your life. You've let him into your heart, and you allowed him to work and do that heart surgery and that brain surgery that you need, and that soul surgery to heal you up and to allow you to go out and love fully in an impactful way. So think about that as well. As what type of friend are you? What type of spouse are you? What type of boyfriend or girlfriend are you? What type of anything, leader are you in your life? Are you the type that is willing to correct, rebuke, and encourage, like St. Paul tells us to? Or are you somebody who just kind of softly lets people live the life that any way they want, not encouraging you to be judgmental all the time, but you have to be willing to challenge people to say, hey man, do you really feel like you're fulfilling your full potential right now? And I have to challenge myself in that all the time as well. And lastly, the last thing I want to talk about is this definition I love from Matthew Kelly: is what makes a good friend, what makes a good spouse, what makes a good book, what makes a good anything. The simplest test is, does it make you a better version of yourself? So think about that. Evaluate the relationships in your life. Which of those relationships make you a better version of yourself? They take you closer to being a saint, closer to living your full potential and living the life God has created for you. He's created you for a specific and definite purpose. And there's people in your life right now who are taking you closer to that. And there's people in your life right now who are taking you further away from that. And that means, in other terms, there's people in your life who are taking you closer to heaven and people who are taking you further away from it. And so evaluate that. Understand, who are you spending the most amount of time with those two categories? And are they proportionate with one another? So at least should be 1-to-1, in my opinion. But you ideally would have more people who are taking you closer to heaven than people who are pulling you away. And those people can also be found in podcasts and books and things like that. But you can't replace having somebody who you know face to face, that you can journey with, that knows you and you can open your heart up to and get their feedback, and they're allowed to you give them permission to speak into your life and to correct you when needed. And this aspect of relationships is huge, because the quality of our life will largely be based on the quality of our relationships. And so you want to make sure that you're pursuing relationships with those good people, because, we have a stress-ridden, anxiety-ridden, difficult society right now with a lot of loneliness that really plagues our world. And a large cause of that is because people don't develop relationships with good people who will have that goodwill for you and will actually love you and will your good and allow you to reciprocate that for them as well. And to have that good virtuous friendship, the highest form of friendship that Aristotle talked about, the virtuous friendship where you're actually growing in virtue together. I've had several of those in my life, praise God, and it's been life-changing. It's been very uplifting and awesome. And it's allowed me to then go and serve other people the way God's called me to do it. It's allowed me to go and serve the people who are desperate, who need an encouraging word, who need wisdom. It's because I gathered myself around with these people. I surrounded myself with these people who are able to encourage me, uplift me, and correct me when they see me slipping or they see me acting up, So I say to you today, if you feel like you're in a rut, you feel like you're slacking, the same thing St. Paul said to St. Timothy: who is it that got you all jacked up? Who is it that's gotten in your way and that's taking you from the path that God has laid out for you? Think about it, pray about it, and make good decisions. Be your best.